They say the ruby is the stone of charismatics, the stone for those who write their own rules. It's little wonder, then, that Princess Margaret adored rubies and built a collection worthy of her vibrant personality. Some of her treasures you may know well. This red Cartier bloom was her faithful companion at the races and glittering receptions alike, but behind the sparkle of her most famous jewels lay a hidden world of personal stories, revealed to the public only after that famous auction, touching gifts, bold personal designs, and commissions for young British talents. And what better time to tell these stories than in July, the month of the ruby? So prepare yourselves for tales that shine brighter than the gems themselves. And for the finale, I've saved a piece that's rarely discussed. It's a tiny brooch, and its entire history is confirmed not by official records, but by a simple handwritten note from the princess herself. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. But before we dive into the first of her ruby treasures, it's worth taking a moment to understand what kind of collector Princess Margaret actually was. She wasn't just a passive recipient of family heirlooms. She was an active and knowledgeable force in building her own collection. She commissioned pieces from daring young jewelers and, as we'll see, even created her own personal designs. And there's one detail that I think illustrates her dedication perfectly. Author Marianne Wingfield, who studied her collection, recalled this. Princess Margaret is a good example of a great collector. She was meticulous about keeping her jewelry in its individual boxes. Every piece had been carefully recorded and had a story to tell. And it's those stories that we are here to explore today. So, let's begin with a piece that was almost a signature for her, one you may have seen in photographs over the years. It's this lovely floral brooch made by Cartier in London back in 1948. You can just picture the post-war world it was born into. It's not a grand, imposing piece, but it has this wonderful, lively quality, with these beautiful oval rubies making up the heart of the flower and its leaves, all set against these sparkling diamond petals. What's fascinating, and a detail I just love, is that according to Christie's, it was originally created as a clip brooch. At some point, Princess Margaret had it converted into a more traditional pin fitting. In the process, the original Cartier signature was likely lost, but she kept it, always, in its original red leather Cartier case. It's a small thing, but it tells you so much about how she cared for her pieces. And she truly wore it for her entire adult life. You can see it on her during the day, pinned to her coat at the Epsom Derby in 1955. But then she would effortlessly transition it into her evening wear. For the London premiere of Dr. Zhivago, for instance, she paired it with several other incredible ruby pieces, including her magnificent girandole earrings. We'll certainly be taking a closer look at those in a moment. And she didn't just limit it to her clothes. She was famously creative with her jewelry. She would often wear this very brooch as a hair ornament, nestled into her intricate updos for gala performances, where it would catch the light beautifully. She continued wearing it well into her later years, and there's a wonderful famous photograph of her at Kew Gardens in 1991, looking so chic with her sunglasses and this familiar ruby flower pinned to her dress. It was clearly a constant companion. When her collection was brought to auction after her death, the brooch was estimated to sell for between £10,000 and £15,000. But such was the interest, and perhaps the affection for this piece she wore so often, that the hammer fell at a staggering £108,000, and today its whereabouts are unknown. This brooch, perhaps more than many others, is one that I find a particular shame didn't remain with the family. Given that it was so clearly a favorite of Princess Margaret's, it would have been so lovely to see it worn today by her daughter, Lady Sarah Chatto. There's a certain sadness, I think, when jewels with such a strong personal story leave the royal collection and disappear from view. But the story of her floral jewels doesn't end there. That beloved brooch had a perfect partner. These are her ruby and diamond flower clip earrings. Made around 1950, they are a beautiful complement to the brooch, each featuring a central oval ruby, surrounded by a wonderful mix of brilliant pear and baguette-cut diamonds. They weren't from Cartier, but came in a fitted box from another great London jeweler, Carrington & Co. Princess Margaret began wearing them shortly after her marriage, and they became another lifelong favorite. She would often wear them together with the brooch, creating that perfectly coordinated and glamorous floral suite. But this beautiful floral set wasn't her only pair of spectacular ruby earrings. For evenings that called for even more drama and grandeur, she had another magnificent pair in her jewelry box. And as I mentioned, for glamorous evenings like the Dr. Zhivago premiere, she would often pair that lovely brooch with some truly magnificent earrings. These were her ruby girandole earrings. They're designed in that beautiful classic girandole style, which is a wonderfully elegant term for earrings that have a central top piece with 3 pendants hanging below, much like a chandelier. These are composed of large, pear-shaped rubies set within an ornate diamond framework, all suspended from a ruby and diamond cluster at the top. It's a very grand and impressive design. Interestingly, it's actually unknown how these earrings first came into her collection. There's a suggestion they may have been a gift from a shipping company, as some of her other jewels were, but there's no definite record. It leaves a little bit of mystery, doesn't it? Princess Margaret began wearing them in the mid-1950s, and they feature very prominently in her famous 26th birthday portraits taken by Cecil Beaton. In those early years, she often wore them with the halo scroll tiara, and as the decades went on, they remained a firm favorite, appearing alongside her other great tiaras, like the lotus flower and the poltimore. She seemed to pair them with almost anything. There's even a photograph of her wearing them at a dinner with the former American First Lady, Nancy Reagan. They were, of course, part of the 2006 Christie's auction. Their pre-sale estimate was between £5,000 and £7,000. They ultimately sold for £54,000. And much like the Cartier brooch, their current location today remains a mystery. Now, Princess Margaret's collection wasn't just limited to these grand classic styles. She had a wonderful eye for the Art Deco period, and her collection included 2 very distinct bracelets from that era that showcase its incredible range. The first, from around 1920, is this exquisite openwork diamond band. It has this wonderfully delicate, almost ethereal quality, with a stylized scroll design set with 7 lovely cushion-shaped rubies. It came in its original pink leather case from the famed jeweler Carrington and Company, and you can just imagine the sense of history that came with it. Then she had another piece from that same period, around 1925, but with a completely different personality. This bracelet is all about bold, confident geometry. It features these wonderful graduated step-cut diamonds, each framed by a sharp border of caliber-cut red stones. It's much more assertive and architectural. And this bracelet holds a fascinating little secret of its time. The vibrant red stones framing the diamonds are actually synthetic rubies. Before we think of that as a lesser thing, it's important to remember the context of the 1920s. As the note from Christie's explained, it wasn't at all unusual to find synthetic stones in very fine jewelry. They were seen as modern. They were easier to cut into those precise, fashionable shapes, and they offered this incredible, uniform pop of color that designers just loved. It was a choice of design, not of value. Margaret would sometimes wear both of these Art Deco bracelets together, stacking them on the same wrist. You can just imagine it. These 2 distinct styles, combined with her Cartier flower brooch and the magnificent girandole earrings, creating this incredible, layered suite of rubies and diamonds. It was a bold statement of glamour, uniquely her own. So we see her appreciation for these beautiful, established styles. But Margaret was never one to just look to the past. She had a very keen and active interest in the new and the modern, especially when it came to supporting British designers of her own generation. And one of the designers she championed most consistently was a man named John Donald. He was a graduate of the Royal College of Art, a key figure in the British jewelry revolution of the 1960s, and it was actually her husband, Lord Snowdon, who first introduced them. It began a professional relationship and a friendship that would last for decades. This particular set, a brooch and a pair of ear clips, was created for her much later, in 1982 and 1983. The design is so wonderfully organic and abstract. John Donald created these openwork cells of textured gold, and nestled inside are these beautiful carved ruby and sapphire drops, accented with just a touch of diamond sparkle. Christie's notes that the hammered edges technique used on the gold was unique to this set, designed specifically as a complement to the stones. And this is where the story gets truly personal. The carved rubies and sapphires used in the set were not sourced by the jeweler. They were supplied by Princess Margaret herself from her own private collection. So this wasn't just a purchase, it was a collaboration. She was an active participant in the creation of her own jewels. So this suite tells a wonderful story of her as a patron and a creative force, but her collection also held pieces that were purely personal, items that revealed a more private, even playful side of her personality, things the public rarely, if ever, got to see. Let's go back to the very beginning. This delicate necklace, designed around 1930, is composed of a row of cultured pearls, interspersed with tiny ruby bead spacers. It's a sweet, gentle piece. We don't know for certain how this necklace first came into her collection. It's said that she was photographed wearing this very necklace as an infant for her second birthday portrait. If the story is true, it's likely one of the first significant pieces she ever wore. At the auction, this necklace was chosen as lot number 1, the very first item to be sold, the one that set the tone for the entire historic event, and it certainly did, selling for nearly 20 times its estimate. And another piece that speaks to those very early years is this lovely ruby and diamond bar brooch. The brooch itself is an older, late 19th century piece, but what makes its story so compelling is the box it came in. The lid bears the year 1931, and the auction notes from Christie's confirm something truly special. It was written in Princess Margaret's own hand. Given that Princess Margaret was born in 1930, it's thought this was very likely a christening gift. It's a very pretty and wearable piece of jewelry, with a classic design that wouldn't look at all out of place today. I certainly wouldn't refuse a brooch like that for my own collection. How about you? These pieces tell us about the cherished child. But as the princess grew up, her personal collection began to reflect not just these sentimental gifts, but also her own emerging, vibrant, and even playful personality. And perhaps nothing embodies that private, even playful side of her personality more than this next suite. It's a bangle and a matching ring, designed as a pair of tigers. It is such an unexpected and whimsical piece, a world away from state tiaras. The suite was made in the 1960s by the Italian designer Frascarolo, who was sometimes called the David Webb of Italy for his wonderful and imaginative animal jewelry. The design is just fabulous. The tigers are rendered in bold black and white enamel stripes with tiny ruby eyes, and their heads come together at the front, clasping a diamond link between their teeth. This suite is a wonderful glimpse into her more flamboyant, adventurous side. She was famously photographed wearing the full set at the London premiere of the film The Magic Christian in December 1969, looking absolutely of the moment. And the journey of these pieces continues even today. More recently, the tiger ring appeared at auction once more, this time offered on its own, without the matching bangle. So this suite represents a choice of personal style, a piece she wore for its sheer personality. But her private collection was also filled with pieces of deep sentimental value, often connected to the person she was perhaps closest to, her mother, the Queen Mother. And that connection to her mother is beautifully illustrated in another piece from her collection, this time a lovely little watch from Cartier. It was made around 1940, and it has that classic, elegant Art Deco feel. The shoulders of the watch are set with caliber-cut synthetic rubies, again showing how these stones were a deliberate and fashionable design choice in that era. But the story of how this watch came to be hers is what makes it so special. It was a Christmas present from her mother, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, given to her when she was just 20 years old, and it wasn't a new commission. The provenance notes from Cartier show that the watch had a little life of its own before it ever reached the princess. It was sold back to Cartier by its original owner in August of 1950, and just a few months later in December, the Queen Mother purchased it for £100, specifically as a gift for her daughter. And speaking of personal history, this next bracelet seems at first glance just as intimate and understated. It's a delicate line of old-cut diamonds, and right at the center, a beautiful natural pearl is flanked by a single cabochon ruby and a sapphire. But while the watch tells a story of a family Christmas in the 1950s, this bracelet's story begins much earlier, in a different country and a different world entirely. It originally belonged to Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Maria Fyodorovna of Russia, the sister of Britain's Queen Alexandra. After the Empress's death, this piece made its way to Britain, where in 1929, King George V gave it to his wife, Queen Mary, as a Christmas present. And then the tradition of gifting continued. The bracelet was passed down again, this time as a 21st birthday gift to Princess Margaret in 1951. You can just imagine receiving something so precious, not only for its gems, but for the hands it has passed through, from a Russian empress to a British queen and then to you. It's clear, then, that Princess Margaret became a custodian of pieces with legendary pasts, and so many of those treasures, both large and small, traced their origins back to one particular place, her favorite jeweler, Cartier. Her collection was filled with their exquisite work, like this charming brooch from 1938, designed by Cartier as a daisy with a heart of cabochon rubies. While seemingly a simple, joyful piece, it holds a significant place in royal history. Princess Margaret chose to wear this very brooch for an important family occasion, the christening of her nephew and godson, Prince Charles, in 1948. It's a lovely thought, choosing this bright flower to celebrate the arrival of the future king. And going back even further, her collection held this pair of exquisite Belle Epoque hairpins. Made by Cartier in Paris in 1907, each is a tiny arch of caliber-cut rubies and rose-cut diamonds. After the 2006 auction, it appears their story came full circle. It's widely believed that Cartier bought the pins back to add to their own historic archive. This is strengthened by the fact that photographs of these exact hairpins have featured in publications covering major Cartier exhibitions, such as the one at the Vienne Museum. It seems a fitting destiny for pieces of such history. And Princess Margaret's collection held jewels whose provenance was even more central to the main line of the monarchy, pieces that belonged to her grandmother, Queen Mary, from the very beginning of her royal life. Take, for example, this exquisite Belle Epoque ring. It features a marquise-shaped diamond, beautifully framed by a delicate border of caliber-cut rubies. Its history is just incredible. This was a wedding gift given on the 6th of July, 1893, to the Duchess of York, the future Queen Mary, from her father-in-law, the future King Edward VII. It's amazing to think this ring was there right at the very start of Queen Mary's journey. And then there was this brooch, which is such a clever piece of design from around 1908. It's a target brooch with reversible concentric circles of gems, allowing it to be worn showing rubies, sapphires, or emeralds. This, too, belonged to Queen Mary. It was a personal gift from her husband, the future King George V, on Easter Day in 1908. So those were the jewels of her grandmother's history, but the two most significant rings in Princess Margaret's collection tell the story of her own. Of all her personal stories, her marriage to Anthony Armstrong Jones certainly marked a defining chapter. He was a photographer, an artist, a man from outside the traditional aristocratic circles, and his arrival represented a distinct break with the past. When they became engaged in 1960, the ring he presented her with reflected that modern artistic sensibility. Being a designer himself, he didn't just go out and buy a ring. He created it specifically for her. He designed it to resemble a tender rosebud, which was a very thoughtful and specific reference to her middle name, Rose. The ring itself featured a beautiful ruby at its heart, surrounded by a halo of diamonds. But what makes this vintage style so different from modern designs is the proportion of those diamonds. They are much larger, almost like individual petals unfurling around the center. And in another quiet break from tradition, he didn't go to Gerard or Cartier, the typical royal choices. He had it made by the English jeweler S.J. Phillips. Unfortunately, unlike so many of her other famous jewels, we have no truly clear, high-quality photographs of the engagement ring. In the official pictures from her engagement announcement in February 1960, and in other photographs from that time, we can just about make out its silhouette on her finger. The reason for this is something of a double-edged sword. The good news is that the ring was almost certainly not sold. It's believed to remain privately with her family. The bad news for us, as admirers of jewelry, is that because it wasn't part of that famous Christie's auction, we lack the detailed, professional photographs that exist for the pieces that were, sadly, sold. So, while that engagement ring speaks volumes about her new role as a wife, the other significant ruby ring in her collection speaks purely to her identity as a princess of the blood. And because this one was part of the Christie's auction, we have these beautiful, clear photographs of it. It's probably for this very reason that this is the ring so often mistaken for her engagement ring from Antony. You'll frequently see its image used in articles when discussing their marriage, but that's incorrect. The true story of this ring is entirely different, and in many ways speaks even more to her character. This is the ring she designed herself. She took 3 beautiful oval rubies that were a personal gift to her from her mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and she created her own design around them. The 3 rubies are set between shoulders of clean, sharp, baguette-cut diamonds, with a delicate edge of brilliant cut diamonds for extra sparkle. There's something very telling in that, I think. She's not just accepting a piece of history, she's actively participating in it, using stones from her mother, but arranging them in a way that felt right for her. It's a quiet but clear expression of her respect for heritage, and at the same time her own very distinct sense of style. And so that brings us to our final piece. It's not the grandest or the most valuable in terms of materials, but for me, its story is the richest of all. It's this tiny antique bee brooch, first made around 1890. Its body is crafted from cat's eye chrysoberyls, which have this soft, silky gleam with 2 tiny rubies for eyes and delicate diamond-set wings. But its true beauty, of course, lies entirely in its story. And this is a story that begins right at the dawn of a new century. In 1900, this brooch was given as a christening gift to a 7-week-old baby girl, the infant Lady Elizabeth Bowes Lyon, the future Queen Mother. It was one of the very first jewels she ever owned. Decades later, on the 10th of February 1945, the Queen Mother passed this treasured keepsake on to her younger daughter, Princess Margaret. And we know this with such certainty because of something truly precious that was sold alongside it. A small note in Princess Margaret's own hand, which reads, "Almost first bit of jewelry given to Mum, given to me the 10th of February, 1945. I find that handwritten note so incredibly moving. It shows this wasn't just another pretty object to her. She understood its significance. She knew she was holding a piece of her mother's own childhood. And it's for this very reason that I feel a real sense of sadness about the fate of this particular brooch. When you consider its incredibly touching and personal history, it is, for me, a genuine shame that it left the royal family. It feels like one of those rare pieces, a tangible piece of love passed from a mother to a daughter that you just wish could have remained with the family, to be quietly cherished forever. And so, from the public glamour to the most private memories, that was the story told by Princess Margaret's rubies. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I'm always so fascinated to hear what you think. What does this collection of jewels tell you about her as a person? And is there one particular piece whose story resonated with you the most? And if you'd like to continue exploring these wonderful histories together, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to the channel. I look forward to seeing you again soon.